They say music represents life. And indeed, music has a pulse. We measure musical time not with a clock, but through the many levels of pulse we feel when playing or listening to music. Some songs give you a literal pulse with musical sounds, like the boom 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 you hear at the beginning of Billie Eilish's Bad Guy. In other songs, nothing necessarily happens at the moment a pulse occurs, but we still feel it.
Where are we? What the hell is going on? The dust has only just...
I'm Professor Drew Nobile, and this video is about musical time. We're going to discuss levels of pulse, beats, measures, hypermeasures, beat divisions, and others, all of which together is known as meter. Most of the time, when we listen to music, we can tap along at a regular pace. The pulse that we tap is what we call the beat. The beat is a particular level of pulse that tends to be at a rate of 1 pulse every half second to 1 pulse every 1.5 seconds. So let's listen to the beginning of Stevie Wonder's Sir Duke and tap along with the beat. Now the thing about musical meter is that at the same time as there are those beat level pulses, there are also slower pulses happening at the same time. So our beat pulse in Sir Duke sounded like this. Beat, 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 beat. But you can also feel 1/2 that speed. Beat, 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 beat. And then there's one even slower than that, and this one is at the level of the entire melodic groups. So you have like the da-da-da-da, that would be 1 pulse, and the da-da-da-da-da, that would be the next pulse. So it sounds like this. Beat, 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 beat. We can visualize these 3 levels of pulse with 3 rows of dots. Here on the bottom row, we have our beats. Each dot represents a beat, and we read left to right. The middle row shows pulses occurring every other beat, and the top line shows the pulses that occur every 4 beats. So now we can listen again to Sir Duke with these 3 levels of pulse going on at the same time. Sir Duke reflects the most common pulse hierarchy, where each level of pulse is half as long as the next level. So we have our beats, and then another pulse every 2 beats, and then the next every 4 beats, and we could even feel one every 8 beats and every 16 beats, all powers of 2. Sometimes, though, pulses group in 3s rather than 2s. So in a different song, we might have a pulse every 3 beats rather than every 2. Let's count along now with Aretha Franklin's I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You. Notice that you've got 3 beats for every larger pulse. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
And I don't know why I let you do these things to me. My friends keep telling me
Theoretically, there are infinite levels of pulse, but at some point the pulses become too slow for us to really be able to feel them the way we feel a beat. We can get a pretty good sense of how musical time works in a given song by focusing on two levels of pulse. The beat, of course, and also a deeper pulse level called the measure. Our perception of musical time really depends a lot on how many beats there are in a measure. There are basically three choices: 4, 3, or 2. When there are 4 beats in a measure, we call that quadruple meter. This is what we saw in Sir Duke. The top row of dots represents the measure level pulse. Each pulse at this level is the beginning of a new measure. That's the downbeat of a measure. The bottom row of dots represents the beat, and there are 4 beat pulses for every measure pulse. We often number these beats within each measure, so we can count this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. In quadruple meter, there's also this middle level of pulse, which occurs every 2 beats and every half of a measure. So really what happens here is that the third beat of every measure has a sort of in-between pulse. There's not really a name for this pulse. It's kind of like a half pulse. So you get like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. When there are 3 beats per measure, we get triple meter. There isn't an in-between level in triple meter. There's just the beat pulse and the measure pulse every 3 beats. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and so on. There's also duple meter. Maybe. Duple meter might not really exist. Duple meter is when there are 2 beats per measure. But that's sort of the same as quadruple meter, right? Every level was just 2 pulses of the next level. But essentially, duple meter involves treating the middle level of pulse as the beat, rather than the lowest level, as in quadruple meter. The highest level remains the measure, but now there are 2 beats per measure, so 1, 2, 1, 2. The lowest level is now a quicker pulse that divides each beat into 2 sub-beats, like 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So let's listen to Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag. Here you could feel a fast beat like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But you might instead consider the beat to be half that length, like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. The measures are the same in both. It's either 2 slow beats per measure or 4 faster beats per measure. This example shows that it's somewhat arbitrary which 2 levels of pulse we choose to name the beat and the measure. The main thing to internalize is that there are multiple levels of pulse. The quicker ones are divisions of the slower ones. Now in your next video, we're going to look at levels of pulse that are faster than the beat divisions. We saw a little bit of this in the Joplin example. We're also going to talk about how to notate meter in sheet music through the use of time signatures. I hope you're excited.